It looks like I don't know, a squid followed by a mushroom. No, more like a squid than a mop. Hey there. Hey, welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett. If you've never listened to the show before, welcome. In addition to providing entertaining and informative photography-related info, I also go on adventures with the crew of the Starship Fibonacci. At the moment, I'm trying to decipher some glyphs we found on the planet Arbre, and with the help of this translator robot. Wouldn't it be easier if you just scanned the glyphs? Sure. Then I wouldn't learn the visual language. Makes total sense. Speaking of visual languages, on this episode of the Nerdy Photographer Podcast, I speak with photographer Alana ONeal about how beginning photographers can find their own unique visual voice. The term visual storyteller gets tossed around a lot in this industry, but what does it actually mean? We're tackling that question right after the break. You told me you weren't going to scan it. Now you've taken away all the mystery. Hey, photographers. Are you tired of using the same stale poses with your clients, resulting in stiff and unnatural photos? Consider using Let's Be Real prompts instead. Prompts are not just a list of poses. They're designed to help you create a more engaging, fun environment for your photo subjects, resulting in more natural and authentic images. With the Nerdy Photographer's Let's Be Real prompts, you'll have a unique set of prompts for couples, weddings, families, and individuals, ensuring that you never run out of ideas. Prompts are particularly helpful for clients who are nervous or self-conscious about having their picture taken. By giving them something else to focus on, they can become more relaxed and their reactions will be more authentic and less guarded. Using Let's Be Real prompts will not only help you create more fresh and dynamic images, but it will also increase your confidence and your client's confidence in you. You'll be able to handle difficult situations and subjects with ease, resulting in more satisfied clients and a stronger photography business. So start using Let's Be Real prompts from the Nerdy Photographer today and elevate your photography to the next level. Go to nerdyphotographer.com and go to our store, or click the link in the episode notes and get started creating authentic, engaging images today. Hello and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett, and I'm here today with photographer Alana ONeal. Alana, welcome.
Thank you so much, Casey, for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
We're going to have some fun. But first, we roll the dice breaker, and it's 14. Best photography or business-related purchase or investment you've ever made?
Oh gosh. That's a hard one. I'd say this is so basic. I think a really, really good lens, like investing in a really, really solid, like one good lens. That's my best purchase.
Yeah. I always tell people when they ask that's, should I buy a new camera? Should I get the most top end camera? I'm like, no, always invest in the lens first.
Yeah, definitely.
They'll last you way, way longer than anything else. I have lenses that are, like 15, 16 years old that I still use. So you've had a kind of an interesting journey in photography.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you want to relate that a little bit to our listeners so they can kind of understand where you're coming from.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm from Vermont, actually. I live in Hawaii. It has been a little journey for me to get here, but I grew up in a horse farm in Vermont, and my mother was an artist and a hobby photographer, and we had a dark room in our horse barn growing up. So when we were little, we would, when she would close the door and finally let us in, we would help her develop film. And it was just a really magical process to see as, a 7-year-old, like this image just appearing to life. And you're like, wow, like I shot that, or, we just saw this at the horse fair and now we're here developing it. It's just a really interesting process. And that was kind of where my foot got in the door of photography. And then because we lived in the countryside and she was an artist, she was always pointing out beautiful things like, look at the color of this flower, how the clouds change over the light of the mountain. So we were just like very fine-tuned to see things and beauty and especially in the natural world. And that kind of where my love for photography began was actually in nature photography. Um, she also, another thing she did, she was a wedding floor. So we had huge gardens. And so I loved capturing the flowers, the animals on the farm, landscapes. So that's where my love of photography began, was just my humble beginnings on a rural horse farm.
That's awesome. I mean, just I can imagine like at that age, that just seeing the photo develop is very magical experience almost. Like
Oh,
there's just,
yeah.
just this, like the photos coming to life in the chemicals. That's really awesome. Um,
Mhm.
so we're going to discuss the topic we're going to get into today is kind of visual storytelling. This is something that gets thrown around a lot, especially in my line of work as a wedding photographer. There's always people like, "Oh, I'm a visual storyteller," but I think a lot of people
Mhm.
aren't exactly sure. Like, I don't know if they necessarily know what that means. Can you explain what visual storytelling means to you and why you believe it's an essential part of photography?
Sure, it is thrown around a lot, but to me, I think it's the essence of what makes a good photograph or a good series of photographs. I think it's a way of drawing in the viewer into your viewpoint, your perspective, and in a moment in time. It's not just simply conveying information across your camera. It's not just taking a picture of something, just of what you literally see in front of you. It's actually creating and telling a story of that moment that we as a viewer can relate to. That's kind of what I find. And I find like when photos do have a story, even if it's just something so small like an emotion or some spontaneous act or something that you see when street photography, I find that so much more compelling and interesting because it leaves the viewer guessing and questioning, like what's happening here, or what's there's like a question mark at the end of it, and it makes you want to like uncover it a little bit more and dig a little bit deeper, and makes the viewer think like, well, what did the photographer mean? Why did they capture this but not that? Why did they crop this but why did they leave this out, or why did they shoot from this angle? And I think it's up to the photographer to really harness all of these elements through, composition and color and lighting, to tell the story of what they want to tell of that moment, or moment in time.
Yeah,
So
it's the photographer's perspective on things. And I think that's
exactly.
something that some photographers, I'm not going to say it's like people starting out, because I've seen people who are, much further in their careers who still don't really seem to grasp the concept that they get to choose like the
Mhm.
perspective and the story that they tell. And it's something that I've gone through and like teaching people about wedding photography is like, part of what you're getting hired for is your storytelling ability. And
Mhm.
that one of the things that I think is the greatest compliment is when people who weren't at an event look at it, the photos, and think, "Oh, I know what's going on here. I feel like I know these people. I feel like
Mhm.
I'm present here," because that's the point for me in that case. Like I know, like, I agree with your description of storytelling. Like I think for me, my job as a storyteller, and that is to take people back to that moment and tell them the story, so that,
Mhm.
so the people who were there really remember that moment, and people who weren't there feel like they were there. Um, but
Absolutely.
in other types of things like portraits and whatever, yeah, there's a whole different in each genre of photography. It kind of takes on a different. It can take on a different connotation, uh, just like purpose for storytelling.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't shoot weddings, but I shoot a lot of food photography. It's like, how can I transport the viewer, or how can I convey the emotions or feelings in this scene of food? Like, I want them to feel like how juicy this tomato is, and how the bread is crusty and it's flaky and coming off. Like, how can I convey that story? Because a story of a loaf of bread just on a cutting board that's not open or sliced is so much different than one that's ripped and torn open and there's crumbs everywhere, and
Right.
it tells a different story, so that's up to you as a photographer, and there's none is right or wrong. It's just your perspective of this scene.
Yeah, and again, it's the story you're trying to tell and like what you want
Mhm.
that feeling to be. I think that photographers are better served to like knowing that they get to determine how that story is told. It gives them
Mhm.
I don't know what's the word. I was gonna think power, but agency in their own work. I think that gives you a little bit more confidence in your own work, that you get to have that ability to tell the story in your own way. So for you,
Mhm.
what are some key elements to making a compelling visual story, and how do you incorporate those into your work?
Sure. I think generally speaking, taking it from just every genre of photography, I think lighting, color, composition, and different angles and perspective are really key things to consider. Because lighting is everything in photography, and it
Mhm.
conveys so much, from light to, bright and airy, and then moody and darker tones. And there's so much power that we can harness simply just through how we light our subject or our scene that can convey so many different types of emotions. And same with, different rules in photography. Not that we, abide by rules all the time, but negative space. Like if you leave a little bit of space to the right of your subject, that's going to feel so much different than if you cropped it in really tightly and shot, from below, because, how you position the camera is going to change how the viewer is going to feel about the subject or the scene. So, all of the general principles of photography are tools that we can use at our disposal to help convey the story you want to tell. Same again with color. You want if you want to have this like soft, serene feeling, you're not going to include. You're going to crop out anything in the frame that's shockingly bright red or orange or um, any. It's just having a knowledge and awareness of how color can affect our psyche as well.
Yeah, it's all of the things that are at your disposal. I was one of the things that I find especially useful in this type of like when you're trying to tell a story. The composition is obviously like
Hmm.
for me is the first thing, because then I think about if I'm lighting it myself, I'm thinking
Hmm.
lighting comes in. Like, if I'm artificially lighting it, I can do that, or finding the light in the room. But how do I want to place
Yeah.
things? Because that composition really can tell a lot, like you said, a lot of different things. It looks completely different if you
Hmm.
where you place the subject in in your frame. And apparently, speaking of composition, apparently Dutch angles are like super in right now. Um, I don't know why, but apparently they're trending. Um, the all of these things, these tools at your disposal. One of the things I try to teach people is, like you had mentioned, perspective. If you're trying to make your photo more interesting, change your perspective. Like, get down low, get
Hmm.
up high. Anything
Hmm.
taken at eye level is going to be, it's going to look the same as anything people normally see.
Yep.
So
Yep.
if you're taking a photo of whatever it is, whatever you're taking a picture of, if you're doing it from like eye level, it's going to look like how anybody else has ever like seen that particular scene.
Yeah. Yeah, and another tip I say too is like before you even start shooting and clicking your shutter button, because sometimes I personally also get so excited. I just want to like get in there and start shooting, but just take a step back and sit for a minute. If you have the time, obviously you don't want to miss the kiss or the
Oh,
proposal
yeah.
or whatever. But if you are traveling or something and you are witnessing a moment, or doing your portrait, just like take a minute and like feel the energy and feel the other person or the subject, and just like be present at first. Like sometimes like when I go to a landscape, or like a beautiful scenery or something, and it's just like just be present in the moment, and then just like what are these feelings that are coming up, and how can I convey it through my camera lens. Maybe there's like this piece I'm feeling in this meadow. Instead of maybe shooting at eye level, maybe I get down to the ground where there's like little daisies and I shoot through the daisies of the meadow or something. You kind of be with the moment at first before you just jump right in and capture it.
Yeah, I think you have to open yourself up. It's very funny that the episode that is coming right before this one is talking all about being present in the moment, and we talking about landscapes. So it's very like the through line is there. Yeah, it's just this sort of being connected to your subject and being present in that moment to understand like how you really want to convey that and the feeling that
Mhm.
you are getting from it. And it's the same, like you said, for like whether it's people, whether it's an event, whether it's a landscape, whether it's food, whatever, you really have to be in that moment and experiencing it, which is one of the reasons why people tell them like, do you go in with a shot list to weddings? Like I kind of know what I want to get, but I don't go in there with like this list of like, oh, I got to get this shot and I got to get this shot. I got to get this shot.
Mhm.
I go into every thing, every project, whether it's a wedding, whether it's portraits, whether it's, a commercial gig or something like that with an open mind. And I think that's like
Mhm.
one of the greatest tools that we as photographers have is to kind of go into it very open minded to allow ourselves to think about it with fresh eyes as opposed to like
Mhm. Yeah.
going in with a preconceived notion.
Yeah, I like to have a shot list like as a guideline. Like if I'm shooting for a client, I'm like, okay, I know this
Right.
is a must. I need to get all these done. But then I'll have to give myself some to be open for creativity or like a spontaneous thing that just happened because a bird flew over and it's just the
Yeah.
perfect moment and whatever. Like you have to give yourself that freedom to play. Because what I think also too is like what makes great photography is like these casual, like handed playful moments that are just like unexpected, that aren't so staged and scripted, that is you are just like casually swinging your camera and you're just like, oh wow, like that, boom. Like sometimes my favorite photos are just totally unplanned.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. I'm the same way. Like you have like, especially when you're given like something by, like, oh, the client needs these shots, whatever, or
Yeah.
something. You're like, okay, yeah,
Hmm.
I want to get those, but I also kind of want to leave myself open to something else. Uh, it's very funny when I've gone through in this process of interviewing people um, and looking at people's portfolios. A constant theme throughout that is I will bring up something usually to people and say like, "Oh, I really loved this series of photos." It's always those photos that I find
Hmm.
connect with me. And usually the photographers say like, yeah, that's the one. Those are the ones I love most from that shoot are the ones that weren't planned ahead of time. They're the ones that happen
Hmm.
in the sort of like the margins between the planned photos that allow it, like,
Hmm.
that are that those playful moments or less scripted in that sense.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So in an effort to like tell a story, but be unscripted in the telling of it, like, what is your approach to planning and conceptualizing before you do a shoot? Like obviously, like we said, we've talked about like not going into it with like a like kind of cookie cutter mentality, but how do you
Hmm.
approach
Hmm.
planning the story?
Sure. So just from a client perspective, so if a client approaches me, which I was recently for a food company, and they were sharing me their ideas, and I like to hear as much from them as possible. But at the end of the day, I want to know like what is this? What is the story of your brand or your images? Like, what do I want it to feel like?
Mm,
Because I think when we begin, like, how do we want this story to feel like? And what's the message that we want to convey in these images? That gives me a starting point. And so if I know I want it to feel rustic and authentic and really humble, that's going to dictate how I'm going to set up, composition or my shots or my angles. So I have these like a framework, just they're very rough in my mind because again, I want to have it be open to the moment, but I think just starting at like, well, what's the message that I want to convey in this story for this client? What are the emotions that I'm trying to tell? And what are the shots or the colors or the compositions or what type of angles would support that story or message? That makes sense.
No, it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. But I think this kind of goes into my next question, which is how, like, across the various genres of photography, storytelling would differ. Like we had talked about a little earlier.
Hmm.
Like this is like a brand shoot, whether it's for food or for whatever, is going to be different than a portrait session and how you tell the story.
Definitely.
Like because you're telling a story for a different subject, a different,
Hmm.
and like
Yeah.
when you're doing something for a brand, you want to probably bring in their brand colors in some way into the color palette that
Hmm.
you're working with. You want to talk like what is the message they're trying to project to their clientele. But also when you do like when you're doing portraits for like a family or something, you are trying to like I don't know whoever whatever other portrait photographers are trying to do. I am trying to bring out the uniqueness and the personalities of those people, and how do I and their relationships to each other, as opposed to like
Hmm.
going in and saying like I'm going to do like I'm going to shoot every you just like every other family that I take a portrait of.
Yeah.
I want to show off in some ways in this session to like how you
Hmm.
guys are together, because that's what you're going to want to remember.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like the essence of whatever your subject is. Like, what is the essence of that? Is it a couple or whatever the subject is? Like, how can you translate that essence into, a photograph or a series of photographs or whatever if they have something in mind, like if it's an engagement shoot or a portrait or, wedding, like what's the story that they want to tell of their day? Like, how can you convey it's just so different between different genres, but I think it comes back to like what's the essence of that subject, and in from your perspective, and if it is with a client, like what do they want it to convey through the photos that you work with them together.
Okay, so I'm going to take this in another direction, and this is something that
Okay.
just popped in my head because we're talking a lot about how you do storytelling for like we're doing it for clients, and we're like the essence of the subject of the
Yeah.
client or whatever. If left to your own devices and you're shooting for yourself, how would you go about
Hmm.
like planning or doing something like the like for your own, like you want to create something for yourself?
Hmm.
How would you
Yeah.
go about like deciding what story you're going to tell?
Sure. Well, I think I've done this before. I've given myself an assignment, like when I just needed a creative boost. I was kind of feeling like lackluster and I just needed to, pick myself up and do something creative. So I gave myself a project. And what it began with is a concept. And I would think of a concept and then I would either piece it together by creating maybe a mood board or putting visuals together of my work and some other photos that I found online and creating this mood board of a theme of a concept or a feeling, and then introducing colors and then going out and shooting and trying to replicate that here in on Maui or back home. So I think it always starts for me, if it was a personal project, would just be the concept of like, what if I just take this one thing or this one concept, if it's like a recipe I've made or a beach or a place or whatever it may be, and then develop it around that concept, and then in thinking about like composition and colors and emotions and using visual references to use as a guide when I'm putting and shooting actually actual day, because I find those are really helpful. And again, they're just guidelines because I don't like to, copy or replicate, anything that I've seen. But it's and I do this with my students as well. Is like, rather than putting together a mood board that you want it to be identical to what you've put together, or like on Pinterest or something, you pick a photo that really calls to you and then ask yourself, why is this photo calling to me? Like, what about it do I like? Is it because of the light? Is it because the color choices? What actual in it? Because that little tidbit is going to help you create your concept or the story that you're going to try to create from it.
I
If that
think that,
makes sense.
yeah, it makes sense. I think that I mean, you've brought up a topic that I think is good for a lot of people to hear, which is mood boards are for mood and not just for
Hmm.
like, replicating things. I mean, too often have I seen people like come
Hmm.
in and be like, well, here's my mood board. Like, so we want to get these shots. And I'll be like, that's
Yeah,
not what this is for. We're not trying to like replicate
exactly.
this thing that other people have done. We're going to like,
Yeah.
let's talk like the exact same things that you're talking about. What is it about these photos that you want, that you were talking about recreating, that you like?
Hmm.
So, and then let's take that and figure it out and make something new with that
Yeah.
same
Yep.
feeling to it. And that way
Yep. Yep.
you're emulating maybe, or you're innovating it and like creating something new entirely, but you are still getting that same mood, that's that same feeling that you're getting from the other
Yeah.
images. I think
Yeah.
that's a super important
I was
element.
gonna say, oh, sorry.
No,
I
no,
was
no, go
gonna
ahead.
say because sometimes when you actually like dissect an image of why you've put it on your mood board, it actually has nothing to do with like what at face value of what it is. It's usually like how it's shot or the lighting or the colors or how the emotion of the photo. And it's like that little bit of information is what you need to gather to create something for yourself.
Right, and I've done the same thing, and usually it's composition and lighting are the two main things
Hmm.
that really got me, and I go, okay, that's those are the things I really love about this image, and let's try to get some sort of similar feel given all the other inspirations that are coming in from this, because it might not just be that one image.
Hmm. Yeah.
So how do you I mean, we've kind of touched on this a little bit, we keep talking about the emotions of it, but how important is the role of emotion in this process, and how do you think you can evoke emotion through your photographs?
Yeah, I think emotion plays such a huge role in photography because, like photography, it's an art. And whether it's paint or any type of medium, there's emotion is just going to what's going to pull at our human heartstrings. And I think the more we can tap into an emotion, whether it's, good or bad, or like, I don't think there's such a negative thing as an emotion, but whatever you're trying to convey, I think the more you can pull at a specific emotion or emotions, it's going to draw in that viewer and make it feel so relatable. Because, you can feel what this person must feel like in this shot. You can feel how warm the sun feels on this woman's shoulders. You can just taste and feel like how um, juicy and sweet this strawberry is that this man just picked. And it's like the more you can use composition and lighting primarily to evoke those specific emotions is going to really strengthen your visual storytelling voice, I think.
Yeah, I think that there's just the evocative nature. There's the saying of, like a picture's worth a thousand words. Yeah, it's like there's so much that the photo can tell you, and to think of the not just the, I think you were getting into the senses as well, and like and
Hmm.
senses bring
Yeah.
in it can bring up emotions too. So when you sort of bring up the flowers, like the smell of the flowers, or the taste of the food, or whatever, that also can be evocative of feelings. There's, for example, for me, there out of my own life, if I see a picture of a dish like that my mom used to make, and since she's
Hmm.
no longer with us, like if I see something that, and I see a photo of that, like I'm immediately taken to the smells, the taste, and then like I'm taken
Hmm.
to the emotional level, like then I'm jumping again to like the emotional level of it, and sometimes you
Yeah.
completely circumvent the sensory part of it into the emotional part. But that is like when
Hmm.
you're it's something to consider when you are working with your clients and asking questions of them before you do the shoot, of things like, I here's a thing for me that I always do with weddings and portraits, whatever. I send out a questionnaire to get to know people ahead of time.
Mhm.
What foods do you like? What movies do you like? What music do you listen to? What are these things that give me a sense of who you are so that I
Mhm.
know when I'm shooting like what has an impact on you as the client, because
Mhm.
ultimately I'm shooting for the client, not for myself. Um,
Mhm.
so that is a part of my toolkit is having a knowledge of what evokes something from them, like
Mhm.
like some sort of reaction from them.
Definitely. Yeah,
So
and I think emotion just goes back to yeah, sorry, it
no,
just
no, no.
goes back to being human. It's like when I see something like an really evocative photo, um, maybe it's a man and there's all this negative space around him and he's just standing still. Like you just can feel, there's just a way how you compose a shot can evoke so much feeling. And to me, those are ones that stand out when there is some sort of emotion behind it, whether it's a human or an animal. Even landscapes can evoke emotion as well. So um, I think emotion is like a really a superpower when it comes to creating a visual storytelling.
How do you think that your own audience or clients, how has the impact of the like visual storytelling enhanced like your audience and clients engagement with your work?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm highly sensitive, and I think that when I work with brands and clients, they appreciate my thoughtfulness and sensitivity, and I have a gentle, quiet nature. So all my work really comes from that place, and I find that my audience resonates that, and some don't. Like some want someone who's really loud and bold and um not aggressive, but just like really out there and vibrant, in their style of work. And for me, I'm much more of I have more of a reflective approach. So the brands that I do work with appreciate that. And it's so totally fine that I'm not meant to be and I don't want to be for everyone. So I think the more that I lean into my personal strengths as who am as a person, because it's just naturally goes hand in hand. Like who I am as a person is very much how I shoot and how I tell stories as well. I come at it with a very gentle, sensitive, reflective approach rather than something that's more documentary in style where it's evocative and there's conflict and tension in the frames. It's just not me as a person, and I don't really find that doesn't really resonate or gravitate. I don't gravitate towards that. So I think it comes down to just really knowing who you are and infusing that into your style and your work.
I think it's really important. This is another important lesson for people to learn is that you're not for everybody. Like as a photographer, you are not
Yeah.
for like, and let's take a step aside from everything else. You're not from for every client is not for you. You are not for every client.
Hmm.
It's just, and that's okay. Like you said, there are people
Hmm.
who your work will resonate more with based on your personal style. And yeah, we can have a wide range of styles and approaches to it. And that's good because like
Hmm.
everybody has like a different taste in what they're hoping for.
Hmm.
I think it took me too long when I was starting out to kind of accept that. I should have. I feel it's one of those things that I regret not figuring out sooner. I don't know if it took me too long, or whatever, but like that is one of the things that I wish I could go back and go. You know what? You don't have to be for everybody. You don't have to like everybody.
Yeah.
You like find your thing that you like doing and what really means something to you personally, and just stick with that. And the people who like that will gravitate towards you, and you're obviously going to market yourself towards that. But I think that this, in the as much as we're like talking about visual storytelling, it also has to that feel whatever your style is also needs to be backed up by the text in your captions on social media and backed
Mhm.
up by the copy on your website so that all of that is working harmoniously together to, get the message across. And as much as it, like
Definitely.
90% of it is coming through the images themselves, but then that last 10% is coming from the text that's coming with it. Um, so, so we're talking a lot about emotion and the feels of things, but how do you balance the artistic and the technical aspects of photography to tell a story? Like like there's when do you where do you draw the line personally as far as like the technical perfection versus the emotional and artistic aspect of it,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
has more weight to you? Like where do you sort of like draw the lines on things?
Sure, I'm definitely not a technical person. I'm not like one of those gear junkies who are always looking for the latest model or lens, or I don't read reviews on anything. So I definitely leans towards more of the emotion and artistic side. But again, I definitely could learn, there's a balance to both, so you do need to have both. But for me, it goes to, again, if I have the basics down and if I know how I can use these tools to my advantage, such as like the rule of thirds or composition or lighting, and maybe, maybe if I shot at a shallow aperture, that's going to help convey the story more than shooting, at like f16 or something. So it's using these like these literally these technical aspects to my advantage. So maybe instead of shooting, if I'm shooting, moving subjects, maybe instead of what I would normally do, I'm going to shoot, at a fast or a slow shutter speed to convey this story. So it's just, I think for me, I just use very basic aspects of, my camera just to convey the story. And I really lean more towards the artistic and more emotional side. And, sometimes like my photos are blurry and that's fine because I captured the emotion or the essence of that moment rather than making sure everything was pin sharp and tack sharp in this photo. And that's fine to me. If I was just traveling in Italy and there was this one shot that I captured and it wasn't perfectly like all the buildings weren't straight and the guy's hat was crooked, but like I easily just, could fix it in Lightroom and it was a little bit blurry, but like I captured the essence of this moment. And I prefer that over making sure that it's, perfectly, in focus and sharp and, checks all the boxes on, appropriate lighting and everything. I just find that I like to give myself more freedom in the artistic department than making sure it comes out of the camera perfect, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that's I'm in the exact same place. I mean, emotional and artistic weight always outweighs like technical perfection,
Mhm.
and
Me too.
I would deliver images that are slightly blurry, or there's some motion
Mhm.
blur or something, or it's not quite completely horizontally like locked in, um,
Yeah,
just because like this is how, like this is what I feel conveys the emotion better.
exactly.
And yes,
Yep.
you have to use those technical things and know that enough about the technical stuff to help convey how you're
Mhm.
seeing the artistic part of it and the emotional part of it. And like, okay, this is what I want to, this is how I want to tell the story. I want to use these technical
Yep.
aspects to bring out the emotions and
Yep.
the feelings in this image.
Yeah. And also, like when the image is very strong emotionally, or it's like an evocative subject or something, and or like a really spontaneous moment in time, and you're traveling and you just snap it. No one's going to question. At least they wouldn't, unless you're really a big critique. Like, why isn't the horizon straight? Or you should have cropped it like this. And it's just like because it's just going to speak for itself. The emotion that's coming through there, like why you like this photo or why you chose to share it in your portfolio. It's because, oh wow, like that's such a strong image, even though it's not, textbook perfect.
Right. Yeah, I think that there's the people who are gonna like bring that stuff up are just trying to find, they're trying to find
Hmm.
fault with things. Where were you in Italy? Just out
Yeah.
of curiosity.
I was in Sicily and then Florence.
Okay. I've been to Florence
Yeah.
once. I've not been to Sicily yet. I've mostly spent time in Rome and Venice. But yeah, just it is hard to not find a picturesque like
Yeah.
backdrop in Italy. It's difficult. So
Mhm.
as we sort of kind of get towards the wrapping up here, like what advice would you give to photographers who are looking
Mhm.
to develop their storytelling skills and create more impactful narratives and images?
Sure. I think a few things. One is to always stay curious and always follow your gut intuition. So if you are, if you have your camera with you, which I always say to have, if you're traveling or just in your neighborhood, like just always make sure you've got it. It's like my little companion and it's just there. Like my dog is just there. And just if you feel the hit or the intuition to just capture something, just shoot it. And then after time, you'll come back and you'll see all these images, and maybe there's some commonality and some threads that you see in your work. Like, oh, wow, I seem to always shoot like this, or I'm drawn to this type of framing, or, I really love shooting families, like whatever it is, like you'll find over time that you're drawn to certain things and you'll see how your eye is like slowly developing and fine tuning. And to go on top of that is to always just keep shooting and shooting and shooting, because I think you have to get through like 10,000 bad images or whatever it is to get to the good stuff. And just not don't be afraid to waste, I mean, not that we're wasting film, but like, filling up a camera, an SD card with terrible images, because I've done that. And I think you have to get through that stuff to really, start to see who you are as a photographer and what you're drawn to.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. One thing I will add for our listeners is you may hear that thing like your first 10th, I can't remember who said it, but like your first 10,000 images are your worst. They've been
Mhm.
Henry Cartier-Bresson, but maybe that seems,
Mhm.
I feel like,
Mhm.
but it's somebody, so a famous photographer said that like your first 10,000 images are your worst. Just so you know, this first 10,000 intentional images. That's not ones that
Mhm.
you just like, oh, I'm just going to, blindly take these photos. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
the ones that you put thought into, and that's what is going to help you improve is by like actually
Mhm.
thinking about it. Kind of going back to the beginning, what we talked about when you talked about like getting started developing things, and how do you tell a story, and like exercises that you give yourself. Like one of the exercises I give myself, having started out shooting film, is to pick a concept and uh, give myself a limited number of exposures, like a
Mhm.
roll of film. I'm 36, 24, or 12 exposures, and I have to tell the whole story that I want to tell in that number of exposures, and
Mhm.
that really makes me be more connected to it as opposed to just sitting down and like I'm going to take a bunch of pictures and see which ones come out of it, and like it being more thoughtful and
Yeah.
intentional and connected to it. That's one of those things that helps me. Obviously, I'm not doing that every time or when I'm on any gig, but like it is one of those exercises that helps build
Mhm.
those like muscles in your brain to like create.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think just starting out like with a concept, it could be something so basic as, you're going to your local farmers market and you're going to capture the people and the place and the food and whatever it may be. And, give yourself a limited amount of exposure and a time frame. And it's like, what do you want to take away? You don't need to come in with a preconceived concept or anything. You just can be in the moment and just like whatever captures your attention, capture it. You can come at it from like not having any concept whatsoever, or actually creating a concept and then going out there and being really intentional, like you were saying. So, and then I think what just going back and like doing some reflection and looking at your work and also seeing how it has evolved is really helpful, because you can start to see, where where you're leaning towards or where you're moving towards now, and you're like, wow, I really love black and white, or I really love night photography. Something just sparked me when I tried it. So I say, like, try everything, like shoot anything and everything, and then you'll find like really what lights you up.
Find what you connect with.
Yeah, definitely.
Photographers, it's time to revolutionize your workflow with Aftershoot. Imagine culling through thousands of images in a matter of minutes, effortlessly flagging blurry shots and closed eye pictures. Now you can stop imagining and meet your new photography sidekick, Aftershoot, the game changing AI photo culling and editing software. Say goodbye to hours spent sifting through images, as Aftershoot's AI can cull thousands of photos in just a few minutes, grouping together similar shots and flagging those blurry or closed eye pics. I have been using Aftershoot for a little over a year, and I have to say, it has transformed the workflow on the portrait side of my business, culling and organizing my photos from family portrait sessions to corporate headshots in a matter of minutes. For engagements, events, and weddings, it does a great job as a first pass cull for me, since I like to go through and make sure I didn't miss anything, but those family and group photos are all solidly organized together, and that saves me so much time. You can also make your artistic vision a reality. Aftershoot's automated AI editing is customizable to your unique style. Edit thousands of images in just a few clicks, achieving consistency and brilliance effortlessly. Sign up now at nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/aftershoot and experience the Aftershoot advantage with your first month free. Transform your workflow and transform your business. Go to nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/aftershoot or click the link in the episode notes and free up time for what you love by letting AI handle the heavy lifting so you can focus on capturing moments and not sorting through them. Are you ready to take your photography business to new heights? Look no further than PicTime, the ultimate solution for photographers who demand more. Wow your clients with stunning branded galleries that showcase your work like never before. Let your customers preview selected photos on an array of printed goods. PicTime's smart photo store ensures your art shines on everything from canvases to coffee mugs. And take the stress out of marketing with PicTime's automation tools that empower you to effortlessly connect with clients, leaving you more time to focus on your craft. And revolutionize your workflow with PicTime's cutting-edge AI tool that allows you to search and sort images effortlessly, saving you time and ensuring you find that perfect shot in seconds. And that helps you strengthen vendor relationships with precision, curate vendor galleries, sending them just the right images, and enhancing your professional connections. Worried about switching hosts? Fear not. The expert staff at PicTime can seamlessly migrate your photos, making the transition smooth and stress-free. So are you ready to transform your photography experience? Visit nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/PicTime today and discover a world where creativity meets efficiency.
Hey. And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death.
I think that's a great place for us to wrap up. And now it's time for our useless information for this episode. Alana, did you know that if there are 23 people in a room, there's a 50% chance that two of them share a birthday?
Really? Wow.
Yes. Statisticians call this the birthday paradox. And apparently, if there are 75 people in a room, there's a 99% chance that two of them share a birthday. It's like
Wow,
that
that's
to me.
wild.
Yeah, I was like, what, really? And I then thought about it and go, okay, yeah, if you're doing it statistically, I guess it makes sense, but it seems totally weird. Alana, thank you so
That's
much
weird.
for being on the show. Where can people find you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a great chat. You can find me at my website at alanaoneal.com or Instagram I'm at Alana ONeal photo.
Okay. I will include those links in the episode notes so that people can find you. Alana, you're welcome to come back anytime. Happy to have you.
Thank you.
Just reach out and let me know what you want to talk about.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much, Casey.
No problem. And welcome back. Many thanks to Alana ONeal for joining us to discuss visual storytelling and finding your unique visual voice. Be sure to check out her links in the episode notes, and while you're at it, you can also, follow along with us, the Nerdy Photographer, on the various social medias, on the interwebs, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Reddit, all at The Nerdy Photo, all one word, no underscores, dots, or dashes, at The Nerdy Photo. Tell us what, you thought about this episode, or, in fact, any other episode of the show. Leave your photography-related questions so we can answer them on future episodes, or tell us what topics you'd like to hear about in the future. You're kidding, right? It's a receipt for a takeout order? Must have been one tasty meal. Until next time, everyone, stay safe and stay nerdy.